The Brook, the story of someone who found the truth, written by Catherine McDonald. Chapter 19. Sleep Until the Shepherd Calls. The bright March days filled the orchard with buds. Flowering currant blossomed against the warm wall, and daffodils shook out their yellow petals between the roots of the apple trees. Teddy could hear the ducks every morning and evening, but never saw them. For all day now he stayed in bed. "I'm a long way past the allotted span," he said to his son John, who had taken up his abode in the shieling, but spent the most of every day at the cottage. "I don't mind dying, since I shall depart in the sure hope of resurrection, and I pray daily that the Judge will find me worthy of eternal life. And seeing you, my long-lost son, has filled my cup of joy to the full. You will keep to your promise, John." "Dad," said his son, "have no doubt about it. Even now I have begun to search out the truth. Kenneth is my earnest helper. Several times we've talked far into the night, and he has set off to work from the shieling in the morning. I believe he wants to go back with me when the time comes. He tells me there are brethren of Christ in Australia too. Yes, my son, God has not left himself without witness in the distant places of the earth. And if, when ye return, ye lead your family, our family, to enter the saving name of Jesus Christ, then that will be the greatest possible good that can befall us on earth. And, Dad, I'll not forget the part that these good people, Mr. and Mrs. Broom, have played in our lives. They befriended you when you were lonely and poor, and preserved your life that I might see you once more and learn the truth from you." "God will bless them," Teddy assured him. "I know it, for now they have set themselves diligently to the study of his word, and are striving to teach their children too." "Mother," said Peggy, running in after tea one evening, "may I go upstairs and show Teddy something, please?" She appeared anxious lest she should be refused, for the invalid's strength was failing, and the children had often been cautioned lately that their dear old friend was very ill. "All right, dear," agreed Mother, "but don't stay more than a few minutes, in case you tire him." Peggy tiptoed upstairs and tapped the door. "Come in," said a feeble voice. "Ah, there's you, my dear." "I've brought a special treasure to show you," announced Peggy, hiding it behind her back until she explained. "You know the copse across the brook, opposite the shieling?" "I do," replied the old man. "Well, I've always spent a great deal of time round about now hunting for that lovely purple periwinkle with a white ring round its petals." "Yes," said Teddy, "but you didna find one last year, and we all searched." Peggy nodded. "It was my fault that there weren't any. When I was a little girl there used to be quite a lot of them, and I picked every one I could see, and they got fewer and fewer till last year there were none." "Well, my dear." "Teddy, I found one today, a beauty. See, here it is." Peggy produced the lovely flower and held it up for her old friend's admiration. "Isn't it beautiful?" she said. "I did hope I would be able to show you one some day. It's a rare kind. There are plenty of blue ones, but this is more precious. I searched all over that part of the wood, and then I found some roots, so I stuck sticks up to mark the place. Then last week I found a bud, so I covered it up with a flower pot in case the rabbits ate it, and here it is, open." "It's a wonderful little treasure," said Teddy, taking it. "And there's another bud coming," declared Peggy. "Leave that one," said the shepherd, "to produce seed." "Oh, I'm not going to touch that one," said the little girl. "I shall look after those wild plants until there are a lot again. I only brought this one to show you." Peggy tucked the periwinkle into the vase of early primroses, and the sunlight tinged its purple petals to a richer hue. "Peggy," said the old man, "there is something else like this flower that you must tend and nurture through the years." "What is that?" she asked. "The flower of purity. Your heart is the garden. The plant is there. You must watch that it does not die out through thoughtless plucking or neglect. Guard it lest others take it from you. It is a rich flower, and it will blossom and yield seed to the glory of God who planted it, if you tend it." Peggy never forgot his words, though she did not fully understand them at the time. The news passed round that the old shepherd was growing weaker. Farmer Wilmot, who found that he had interests in common with the sheep farmer, came to visit the invalid. "How are my bairns, my sheep?" asked the old man. "Still prospering," answered the farmer heartily. "There are several lambs already, and young Gibson manages the flock well, thanks to your faithfulness to duty." "I love the sheep," said Teddy, and fell silent. John Broom, climbing up the orchard hedge to look inside a blackbird's nest one evening, became suddenly transfixed with fright at the sight of Mr. Jupe approaching the cottage back door along the garden path and carrying 2 sacks. "But I'm done anything, and I'm not doing anything now," thought John, who could not disconnect Mr. Jupe from complaints about trespassing. Mr. Jupe's business, however, was nothing to do with that. Departing from his rule of not visiting neighbours' houses at all, in case inquiry were made about missing cats, he had come to ask about the shepherd's health. "How be the old chap, ma'am?" he asked Mrs. Broom, who answered the door. "Not so well, I'm afraid, Mr. Jupe," she replied. "But he is a wonderful patient. He never grumbles, and is always happy." "Perhaps 'tis on account o' his boy turning up from foreign parts," said Mr. Jupe knowingly, as if he had deduced an original idea. "Not altogether, I think," replied Mrs. Broom. "His mind was at peace before his son came. He's not afraid to die. His faith is a great comfort to him." Mr. Jupe raised his hat out of respect. "Yes," he said, "he'm a good feller. Would he be so kind as to accept this, ma'am? 'Twill make a little nourishing soup for he." Mr. Jupe fell into his sack and fetched out a long yellow-white furry body that turned a pair of wicked pink eyes on Mrs. Broom, who retreated hastily with a cry of fear. "Or, no, not he," apologised Mr. Jupe. "That be my ferret. Here 'tis in t'other sack. A nice rabbit, ma'am, with plenty of fat round his victuals." "That's very thoughtful of you, Mr. Jupe, and many thanks for it."
"And give him my respects," said the keeper as he moved off.
"I will, Mr. Jupe," said Mrs. Broom. Another unusual visitor appeared in the farm of Mr. Sprackling, ambling stiffly up the path. Halting a while at the doorstep before knocking to feel if he had done up his collar, Mr. Sprackling cleared his throat
adjusted his blue spectacles, and thumped on the door with his knobbly fist. "Good evening, ma'am," he said. "How be old Vella?"
"Failing, I'm sorry to say," replied Mrs. Broom. "It was very nice of you to call. I believe our old friend would like to see you if you care to come up for a minute."
Mr. Sprackling tipped his hat over his eyes. "No," he said. "I don't think I'll bother 'ee. My boots be dirty. That Queenie led me a caper all cross muddy farmyard. No, ma'am, thank ye. I just wanted to know how he were. I allus liked he, though he had strange ways o' thinking."
"Not so strange," smiled Mrs. Broom.
"I dunno," said Mr. Sprackling, turning to go. "I dunno, ma'am."
"John," said Teddy one Saturday morning, as the boy took the invalid up a glass of warm milk to save mother's steps, "there is my Bible. Would you read me the 23rd Psalm?"
"I know it, Teddy," said John proudly. "I know it off by heart."
And he stood up beside the bed, while the old shepherd closed his eyes and repeated without fault, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord for ever." The child's voice stopped. "I learnt that out of the Bible you gave me," he said. The old shepherd's eyelids opened, and he spoke. "'Tis the valley of the shadow," he murmured. "My cup runneth over." John crept quietly downstairs. "Mother, I think Teddy's gone to sleep," he said. "Then we'll be very quiet, so as not to waken him, dear," said Mother. But nothing would waken him but the voice that called Lazarus to come forth. For Teddy had passed into an unconscious sleep. "Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord," said Kenneth as he stood among the sorrowing ones. It was natural for everyone to weep, but the daffodils shaking their bright petals above the new grass, the smell of violets from the orchard, and the gentle cry of lambs borne upon the crisp March wind, all spoke of the glad uprise of spring, and gave a hopeful message to those old enough to understand, a message that spoke of resurrection of life from the dead, in an earth from which sorrow and tears would be banished for ever. Some weeks afterwards, Kenneth sailed with John Grey, united by a firm resolve to spread the truth in the land whither they were bound. The whole family of the Brooms, baby Pat included, waved them off at their departure. "It will be a happy day for us all, when there are no more partings," said Mother a little tearfully, as the liner moved almost imperceptibly from the quayside. "Yes," agreed Father, "but we have plenty to do in the meantime, before we and our children enter the family to which Teddy belongs. Temporary partings like this will not mean so much then. Will you get Snowball to shift Teddy's hut into the orchard this afternoon, Daddy?" asked John on the way home. "That's a good idea, John," replied his father. "Uncle John told me to fetch it as soon as possible." "To think the shieling is to be our very own," said Peggy. "I have lovely plans for it." And here I might add a footnote to the story of Beside the Brook. There were conscientious objectors who worked in the Forest of Dean, where the story is recorded. Two of them, after the war and when they were married, did migrate to Australia. There was Brother Hubert Taylor to Hobart in Tasmania, and Brother John Kershaw to Launceston in Tasmania. And it may be that Sister MacDonald was aware of this when she wrote the story that we have just read and enjoyed together. And here, with your permission, I will add a footnote to the story which we have just read together. There were conscientious objectors who worked in the Forest of Dean during the war. Sister MacDonald, who wrote the story, knew them both, and they did migrate to Australia after the war when they were married. Brother Hubert Taylor, with Vera his wife, went to Hobart in Tasmania, and Brother John Kershaw, with his wife Mary, moved to Launceston in Tasmania, and some of our readers may remember them well. Thank you.